The distress call had been repeating for 9 days before anyone on the human relay station bothered to translate the part where the aliens apologized for asking. Corporal Dana Holt heard it on the night watch, alone in the listening room of the frontier post at Meridian Reach, with her boots up on a dead console and a cold cup of coffee going colder beside her hand. She was 19 years old, 4 months out of training, and she had been given the night watch because the night watch was where the service put recruits who had not yet done anything wrong and had not yet been trusted to do anything important. Nothing happened on the night watch. That was the whole point of it. The galaxy was quiet out here at the edge, and Dana had been told, by every senior who bothered to talk to her, that quiet was a gift she would learn to be grateful for. Then the translator finished its work on the 9th-day signal, and the quiet ended, and Dana Holt sat very still and listened to a whole species ask, with terrible politeness, to be allowed to die a little more slowly. The signal came from a world the human charts did not have a name for, 11 light hours away, on the wrong side of a dust lane that no human ship had ever crossed because there had never been a reason to. The voice on the signal was not a voice the way a human voice was a voice. It was a layered thing, a chord of sounds, and the translator rendered it into careful, flattened words that Dana read off the screen as they assembled themselves line by line. "We are the people of the third shelf," the signal said. "We do not know if this reaches anyone. We have heard that there are creatures at the edge of the dust who help. We do not believe it, but we are asking anyway, because we have run out of better ideas." Dana put her boots down. She set the cold coffee aside. She leaned toward the screen the way a person leans toward a fire. "We are not asking for an army," the signal said. "We know better than to ask for that. Armies cost more than a small world can repay, and we have nothing left to offer. We are asking for a healer, one. If you have one creature among you who knows how to stop a sickness, and if that creature is willing to cross the dust, we will give you everything we have left, which is not much, and our gratitude, which is all we truly own. The hunters have taken the rest." The hunters. The translator flagged the word and could not resolve it further. Dana scrolled back through the 9 days of the signal, through the layered apologetic chord repeating and repeating, and she found the parts the earlier watches had skipped, the parts where the people of the third shelf explained, without drama, without any attempt to frighten the listener into helping, exactly what was happening to them. A sickness had come to their world. It had come the way sicknesses came, slowly and then all at once, and it had no cure that their healers could find, and it was killing their children first, because it always killed the children first. That alone would have been a thing a small world could not survive. But the sickness was not the worst of it. The worst of it was that the sickness had drawn the hunters. The hunters were another people, the signal explained, in the same flat, polite chord, as though describing the weather. They lived between the worlds. They followed weakness the way a current follows a slope. When a world grew sick, when a world grew weak, when a world sent up a cry for help, the hunters heard it, and they came, and they took what they wanted, because a weak thing could not say no, and a dying thing could not fight, and a world that was begging for a healer was a world that had already announced it could not defend itself. So the people of the third shelf had spent 9 days in an agony of indecision before sending the signal at all. To call for help was to ring a dinner bell. To stay silent was to die of the sickness. They had chosen, in the end, to call, because the children were dying either way, and a small chance was better than none, and they had aimed their cry across the dust lane at the edge creatures they did not believe existed, and they had apologized, in advance, for the trouble. Dana Holt read all of it. Then she read it again. And then she did the thing that recruits on the night watch were absolutely not supposed to do, which was to leave her post, walk down 3 flights of cold metal stairs, and wake the station commander in the middle of his sleep cycle to tell him that a world was dying 11 light hours away, and had asked the human race, with great courtesy, for a single doctor. The station commander's name was Holloway, and he was old, and he had heard a great many distress calls in his time, and he listened to Dana with the patience of a man who has been woken too many times by recruits who do not yet know which emergencies are real. Then she showed him the part about the hunters, and the part about the children, and the part where a whole species apologized for the trouble of dying, and something in Holloway's old face changed, and he stopped being patient and started being something else. "Play me the request again," he said. The exact words, the ask. Dana played it. One healer. If you have one creature who knows how to stop a sickness, and if that creature is willing to cross the dust, everything we have left, our gratitude. The hunters have taken the rest. Holloway was quiet for a long moment. Then he said a thing that Dana would remember for the rest of her life, which turned out to be a great deal longer than she had any right to expect, given what was coming. They asked for one doctor, he said, because they think that is all they are worth, because they think a healer is an enormous thing to ask for, and an army is unthinkable. Somebody out there has spent a long time teaching small worlds exactly how little to ask for. He stood and reached for the channel that connected the frontier post to the deep relay, the one that ran all the way back to the human worlds, the one Dana had never once seen anyone use. Let us find out, Holloway said, what the human race thinks a sick child is worth. He keyed the channel. He sent the request inward. All of it, the 9 days of it, the apology and the hunters and the children dying first, and then he added, at the end, in his own flat old voice, 8 words of his own. They asked for one, recommend we send one. And then, after a pause that Dana did not understand until much later, he added one more line. And everything that keeps the one alive. The answer did not come back that night. It came back at the start of Dana's next watch, 3 days later, and when it came it was not words. It was a manifest, a long one. Dana read the top of it, and her hands went cold, and she read the middle of it, and she had to sit down, and she never did reach the bottom of it on that first reading, because somewhere around the 400th line, her eyes stopped being able to hold the numbers. The human race had decided what a sick child was worth. The people of the third shelf had asked for one healer. The human race was sending one healer. Her name was on the very first line of the manifest, a doctor named Iris Vance, a specialist in exactly the kind of sickness the signal described, the best the human worlds had, volunteering to cross a dust lane no human had ever crossed to save the children of a species she had never met. And behind her name, line after line after line, was everything that would keep the one alive. She made herself read further than her eyes wanted to go, because she was a soldier now, or trying to be, and a soldier did not look away from a number just because it frightened her. Below the doctor's name came the ship that would carry her, a hospital cruiser called the Lamp of Antares, white-hulled and unarmed, built to do nothing but keep the sick alive. If the manifest had ended there, it would have been exactly what the people of the third shelf had asked for, and Dana would have gone back to her cold coffee and her quiet night, and the hunters over the dying world would have had their dinner after all. The manifest did not end there. Below the white hull came the escort, and the escort was the thing that turned a mercy mission into a story the galaxy out here would tell in low voices for 100 years. The human worlds had read the same 9 days she had read. They had seen the word hunters. They had understood exactly what it meant to send an unarmed ship of healers to a world that had already announced its own weakness to every predator within range. And they had decided that the doctor would arrive. Not might, would. The escort was a formation called the Open Hand. Dana would learn later that the human worlds named their relief fleets that way on purpose, because an open hand offers and an open hand strikes, and which one you received depended entirely on what you did. The Open Hand numbered 2,040 warships. It was led by a battlecruiser named the Steady Word, 4 kilometers of weathered gunmetal hull that had never, in its long service, lost a single vessel under its protection. And the manifest noted that fact in one dry line, the way a person notes a thing that is simply true and not in question. 2,040 warships, to guard one doctor. Dana sat with the number for a long time. She thought about the people of the third shelf, apologizing in advance for the trouble of asking for a single healer. She thought about whoever had taught them to ask for so little, the hunters who followed weakness like a current down a slope, who knew how long teaching the small worlds of this edge, exactly how small to make themselves. And she thought about what those hunters were about to learn, which was that they had finally followed a cry for help to a world the human race had decided to answer, and that the human race, when it answered, did not send what you asked for. It sent what would make absolutely certain you got it. Dana Holt looked out the listening room window at the dark over Meridian Reach, in the direction of the dust lane, in the direction of the dying world, and the hunters who were already gathering over it, and she understood that she was about to watch something the galaxy out here had never seen, and that she had been the one, on a night watch that was never supposed to matter, to ring the bell. The open hand crossed the dust lane in formation, and the hunters were waiting on the far side, exactly as the people of the third shelf had warned, and the first thing the hunters did was laugh. Dana watched it happen from the listening room at Meridian Reach, because Holloway had given her a relay seat to monitor the mission, which was the closest thing to a reward the service knew how to give a recruit who had been right when no one expected her to be. The relay carried the fleet's open channels, the alien transmissions, the whole tangled conversation of a battle that had not started yet, and Dana sat in the dark with her cold coffee long forgotten and listened to the hunters discover what was crossing the dust toward them. The hunters called themselves the Cull. The translator resolved the word cleanly, because the Cull used a trade tongue that half the edge spoke, the tongue of a people who did business across many worlds, and the business of the Cull was weakness. They had a doctrine, and they broadcast it openly, because broadcasting it was part of how it worked. The doctrine was that strength announced itself and weakness asked for help, and that therefore any signal asking for help was, by definition, a signal from prey. The Cull did not hunt the strong. They hunted the asking. They had followed the cry of the third shelf across the dust, the way they had followed 10,000 cries before it, and they had arrived expecting to find a sick world and perhaps a single foolish healer, and instead, they found the dust lane filling, edge to edge, with gunmetal hulls. So they laughed, on the open channel, in the trade tongue, for Dana and the whole edge to hear. A relief fleet, the Cull commander said, his words arriving flat and amused through the translator. The edge creatures sent a relief fleet to a world that cannot pay for relief. How sentimental. How wasteful. You have brought 2,000 ships to a place with nothing worth taking. And now we will take the ships instead, because a fleet that crosses the dust to save the worthless has announced that it values the worthless. And a thing that values the worthless can be bled by threatening the worthless. You have not brought us prey, you have brought us leverage. Lower your guns, and give us the healer and the white ship, and we will let the rest of you carry your sentiment home. Dana's stomach turned, because the logic was airtight in its own terrible way. The Cull had spent generations perfecting it. They did not need to defeat a fleet. They only needed to find the thing the fleet cared about, and the human fleet had announced, by crossing the dust at all, that it cared about a doctor and a hospital ship and the children of a world that could not pay. The Cull had 200 ships of their own, lean and fast and built for boarding, and they spread themselves between the open hand and the dying world, and they put their threat in plain words, and they waited for the humans to do the arithmetic and surrender the soft things to save the hard ones. The human fleet did not answer for a full minute. Dana counted it. 60 seconds of silence on the open channel, while 2,040 warships held formation, and the 200 ships of the Cull waited to be paid in mercy. In the 60 seconds of human silence, Dana learned something about the Cull that the translator was not supposed to let her hear. The Cull commander had 2 channels open, the broadcast one for his threats, and a private fleet channel for his captains, and a flaw in the relay let Dana hear both, and on the private channel, the Cull were not laughing anymore. They were arguing. One of the Cull captains, an older voice, was saying that the formation on the far side of the dust was wrong, that it did not move like a fleet afraid of a fight, that fleets afraid of a fight bunched and bristled and shouted, and this fleet had crossed the dust in perfect silence and arranged itself in a shape the old captain had never seen, a shape that was not defensive and was not aggressive, but was something else, something patient, and that the old captain did not like it. He was saying, in the flat trade tongue, that in 40 years of culling the asking, he had never once seen the asking bring a fleet that did not bunch. He was saying they should take the 40 ships they could afford to lose, probe the formation, and run if it closed wrong. The Cull commander overrode him. Of course he did. The commander had built his rank on the doctrine, and the doctrine said the asking was prey, and a commander who admitted the asking might not be prey was a commander who had nothing left to command. So he silenced the old captain, and he gave the order to reach for the leverage, and Dana, listening to both channels at once, understood that she was hearing the exact moment a civilization chose its pride over its survival, and that it was choosing in real time, with 60 seconds on the clock. and that it was choosing wrong. She wanted to shout at them through the relay. She wanted to tell the old captain he was right, that the formation was a hand, that the hand was already closing, that the only correct move was the one his commander would never make. But the relay was one way, and Dana was 19 and 11 light hours away, and all she could do was sit in the dark and listen to a people decide to die because they could not bear to be wrong. Then the steady word answered, and the voice that came across the channel was not the voice Dana expected. She had expected a warrior's voice, hard and cold. What she got was a woman's voice, tired and even, and almost kind, the voice of someone explaining a thing to a person who was not going to like the explanation. "This is Fleet Captain Marion Okafor, of the Open Hand," the voice said. "I am going to tell you something, and I am going to tell you only once, because we do not have time, and the children on that world do not have time. You have made an error. It is an old error, and it is an understandable error, and it is the last error you will make if you do not correct it in the next 60 seconds. You believe we cross the dust because we value the weak. You are correct. You believe that valuing the weak is itself a weakness, a place where we can be cut. You are wrong. You have it exactly backward, and your whole people have had it backward for so long that you have built your entire way of living on the mistake. We do not protect the weak because we are soft. We protect the weak because we are not. A strong people defends the asking. Only a frightened people preys on it. You have spent your lives hunting the ones who cried for help, and you have come to believe that the crying was the weakness. The crying was never the weakness. The crying was a test, and most of the galaxy fails it the way you are failing it right now, by hearing a small voice ask for a small thing, and deciding that small means worthless. We heard the same voice you heard. We heard a world apologize for the trouble of dying, and we did not send a healer alone, because we knew you would be here, because you are always here, because there is always a cull waiting at the edge of every cry for help, and we are tired of it. So we sent the healer, and we sent 2,040 ships to make certain the healer arrives, and now I am going to ask you the only question that matters. Are you going to move? Dana realized she was holding her breath. The cull commander did not answer right away. On the relay, she could hear the change in the texture of the cull channel, the small sounds of a predator recalculating, and she understood that the cull had never, in all their generations, been spoken to like that. The asking did not speak to the cull like that. The asking begged, or the asking ran, or the asking died. The asking did not explain, in a tired and almost kind voice, exactly why the cull had made a mistake. The cull commander made the wrong choice. Dana understood, later, that he almost could not have made any other, because the entire identity of the cull rested on the belief that a fleet which valued the weak could be bled through the weak, and to back down now was to admit that the belief was wrong, and a people cannot admit that the thing they have built their whole civilization on is wrong in 60 seconds on an open channel. So the cull commander did the thing his doctrine demanded. He reached for the leverage. He ordered 40 of his fast-boarding ships to break formation and burn straight past the human warships toward the white hull of the Lamp of Antares, to seize the hospital ship and the doctor, and turn the human fleet's own mercy into a chain around its neck. It was, Dana thought, watching it unfold on the relay, the single most efficient way the cull commander could possibly have demonstrated that he had not understood one word the human captain said. The 40 fast ships of the cull never reached the Lamp of Antares. They did not get close. The open hand had not formed up by accident. It had formed up the way a hand closes, and the white hospital cruiser sat in the center of the palm where nothing could reach it. And when the 40 borders broke for the center, the fingers of the hand simply closed around them. Dana watched the formation move on the relay display, 2,000 ships shifting at once, with a coordination that did not look like 40 separate captains making 40 separate decisions. It looked like one thing moving, one enormous patient thing that had been waiting for exactly this, and the 40 fast ships of the cull flew into the closing hand and were gone, all 40, in under 20 seconds, without a single human shot coming anywhere near the dying world, or the white ship, or the doctor it carried. Dana had time, in those decades of telling it, to learn the names of the human ships that closed around the 40 borders, because the Edge remembered them, and the Edge made songs of them, and the songs were specific, the way the human race was always specific. The fingers of the hand that closed were 6 heavy cruisers. The patience, the long memory, the we came back, the ode, the quiet promise, and the steady word herself. And they had names like that because the human worlds named their warships for the things they meant to keep. The 40 fast ships of the Cull flew into the space between those 6 hulls, believing it was a gap in the formation, and it was not a gap. It was the inside of a closing hand. And Dana watched on the relay as the 6 cruisers turned inward at once, without a signal she could detect, as though they had agreed on this 1,000 crossings ago, and the gap that had looked like an opening became a fist. What happened inside the fist took 20 seconds, and Dana could not see most of it, because the human ships did not light the dark with showy fire. They worked in cold blue precision, beam after beam placed exactly where it needed to go, and nowhere else. And the 40 fast ships of the Cull came apart not in a single great flash, but in a quick, orderly sequence, like a row of lights switching off, until the inside of the fist was empty, and the white hull of the lamp of Antares sat untouched at the center of the palm, and not one human shot had strayed toward the dying world below. The relay caught the Cull commander's voice in the instant after, on the private channel he did not know Dana could hear. It was a single sound, not a word. The sound of a predator that has just watched a fifth of itself vanish into a thing it cannot name. Dana never forgot that sound either. It was the sound of the asking, finally, coming from the other side. The Cull commander went silent. Dana could imagine the silence on his bridge, the silence of a predator that has just watched a fifth of its strength vanish into a thing it did not understand, and she waited, with the whole edge waiting alongside her on the relay, to see whether he would learn. He did not learn. That was the thing about the Cull, the thing the human captain had named in her tired, kind voice. They had built their whole way of living on the mistake, and a people cannot unbuild that in a single afternoon. The Cull commander did the only thing his doctrine allowed. Having lost 40 ships reaching for the leverage, he committed the rest. All of them. 200 ships minus the 40 already gone. 160 lean, fast hulls. The entire strength of a people who had terrorized this edge for generations, thrown at once against the open hand, in the desperate logic of a predator that has realized its prey is not prey and cannot accept it. This is the part Dana never forgot, the part she described, decades later, to recruits of her own who could not believe an old officer had really watched it happen. She never forgot it because of what the human fleet did not do. It did not roar. It did not flare. There was no great speech, no countdown, no triumphant broadcast. Fleet Captain Marion Okafor came back on the channel one more time, in the same tired, kind voice, and she did not speak to the Cull at all. She spoke to her own fleet, on a channel she left open on purpose, so that the whole edge would hear it, so that every small world that had ever been taught to ask for too little would hear it. "Open hand," she said. "The doctor is needed on the surface. We are behind schedule. Clear the lane." That was all. Clear the lane. As though the 160 warships of the Cull were not an enemy fleet but a traffic problem, a thing in the way of a doctor who had a sick world to reach. And the open hand cleared the lane. Dana watched it on the relay, and could not entirely follow it, because it happened at the speed of a thing that had decided, and the human fleet had clearly decided long before the Cull commander made his choice. The 2,040 ships of the open hand did not break formation to fight. They held the hand closed around the white ship, and they extended one part of it, one wedge of perhaps 300 hulls led by the steady word, and that wedge went through the 160 ships of the Cull, the way a key goes through a lock that was never really locked. There was light. There was, briefly, a great deal of light, cold and blue and precise, and the relay display showed the Cull formation coming apart not in chaos but in order, ship after ship after ship, as though the human wedge were working through a list, and Dana realized with a chill that it was working through a list, that somewhere on the steady word, a targeting system had assigned every Cull ship a number, and the wedge was simply counting down, the same cold patient counting she would later hear described in other human battles, the counting that meant the humans had stopped negotiating and started finishing. It took 90 seconds. The people of the third shelf had warned that the hunters always came, that the hunters could not be fought, that a world which cried for help announced its own death. The hunters had come. And 90 seconds after Fleet Captain Marion Okafor told her fleet to clear the lane, the hunters were gone, all 200 of them, and the open hand had not lost a single ship, and the white hull of the Lamp of Antares had not been touched, and the doctor named Iris Vance was still alive in the center of the closed human hand, and the lane to the dying world was clear. On the relay, the open channel was quiet. Then a new voice came across it, layered, a chord, flat with shock, and Dana recognized it, because she had listened to it apologize for 9 days. It was the people of the third shelf, watching from their dying world, as the thing they had been taught was impossible, happened in their own sky. "The hunters are gone," the chord said, and the translator could not flatten the disbelief out of it. "We asked for a healer. You sent a healer. And you sent the sky. The hunters are gone." In the quiet after the hunters were gone, Dana watched the relay do something it had never done in her 4 months of night watches. It lit up. Not with the mission's channels, but with other channels, dozens of them, then hundreds. Small, weak signals flooding in from across the edge, from worlds Dana had never heard of, worlds that had been listening to the same open broadcast Fleet Captain Okafor had left running on purpose. They had heard a human captain tell the cull that the crying was never the weakness. They had heard 90 seconds of cold blue light end a terror that had ruled this edge for generations. And now they were all, at once, doing the thing the cull had spent so long teaching them never to do. They were asking. A grain world 3 lanes over asked whether the humans helped with crop blights. A mining station asked whether the humans had heard that its air was failing. A convoy of refugees, drifting and out of fuel, asked, in a small frightened signal that Dana had to read twice, whether it was true, whether it was really true, that there was a people at the edge of the dust who answered. The edge had spent generations swallowing its cries for help, because to cry was to summon the cull. And now the cull were gone from one patch of sky, and the dam had broken, and 100 held-back voices were spilling out at once. Dana forwarded every one of them inward, to the deep relay, to the human worlds, because that was her job and because she could not have done anything else. And she understood, watching the signals come, that the human race had not just saved one dying world. It had done something larger and quieter, and far more lasting. It had broken a lesson. The cull had taught the entire edge that asking for help was the same as announcing your death, and in 90 seconds, the human fleet had proven the lesson false, in front of everyone, on a channel left open on purpose, and a false lesson, once broken in public, does not easily reassemble itself. There was one more thing Dana heard on the private cull channel before it went dark for good, and she kept it to herself for years, because it felt too large to say out loud. In the last seconds, as the human wedge counted down the final hulls, the old cull captain who had warned his commander, the one who had said the formation moved wrong, got his ship turned and ran. He was the only one. He broke away from the dying fleet and burned for the open dark, and as he ran, he broadcast, on every frequency, not a threat and not a curse but a warning, to every cull ship and every cull world still out there beyond the dust. "Do not follow the crying anymore," the old captain said, his voice stripped of all its old amusement. "The crying is not prey. We were wrong. For 40 years we were wrong. There is a people at the edge of the dust who hear the crying too, and when they answer it they bring the sky, and they do not bunch, and they do not bargain, and they do not miss. Find new work. The hunting is over." Dana thought that was the truest thing any creature had said in the whole of it, and that it had been said, fittingly, by the one member of the cull who had been willing, even for a moment, to admit he might be wrong. The asking had always been a test. The old captain had failed it for 40 years, and passed it in the last 10 seconds, and the passing had saved his life, and Dana hoped, in the decades after, that he had found new work, and that he had told the truth wherever he went, and that somewhere out beyond the dust there were small worlds crying for help, a little louder now, because a hunter had finally told them it was safe. Far below, on the surface of the third shelf, the doctor named Iris Vance walked out of a small landing craft into the gray light of a dying world, carrying a case of human medicine and nothing else, no weapon, no guard, because she did not need one. The guard was the entire sky, 2,040 hulls holding station overhead, so that one healer could kneel in the dust beside a sick child, without a single thing in the galaxy able to stop her. Dana could not see it, 11 light hours away, but she heard it, later, in the report, and the line she remembered was the simplest one. The doctor had asked the people of the third shelf the same question her captain had asked from orbit. Please tell us where the children are. And the people of the third shelf, who had apologized for 9 days for the trouble of asking for a single healer, had been unable to answer at first, because they could not understand a question that assumed, without hesitation, that their children were worth crossing the dust to save. And Fleet Captain Marion Okafor answered them, in the tired, kind voice, the voice that had not changed through the whole of it, the voice of a strong people who had simply grown weary of watching the weak be taught to ask for too little. We are sorry it took 9 days, she said. We came as fast as we could. The doctor is on her way down now. Please tell us where the children are. The cull did not forgive, and they did not learn, and 11 days after the open hand cleared the lane, the relay at Meridian Reach woke Dana again, this time with a signal that did not apologize for anything. It came on the trade tongue, broadcast wide, meant to be heard by the whole edge, and it named itself the voice of the Cull Dominion, which Dana had not known existed. The 200 ships at the third shelf had been a single hunting band, one of many, and behind the bands stood the Dominion, the gathered strength of a people who had fed on the weakness of this edge for longer than any of its small worlds had kept records. The voice of the Dominion was not amused and was not tired. It was cold, and it was certain, and it made a single declaration that Dana read off the screen with her stomach sinking. The edge creatures have destroyed a hunting band of the Cull, the Dominion said. They have crossed into our feeding grounds. They have taught the prey to cry out. This cannot stand, because if it stands, the prey will believe the crying is safe, and a galaxy where the crying is safe is a galaxy with no place in it for the Cull. So the Dominion will make an example. We will go to the world the edge creatures saved, and we will take it apart, slowly, while they watch, and we will teach the entire edge the older lesson, which is that those who answer the crying will be made to regret it, more than those who ignore it. Let the edge creatures come again. We will be waiting with 1,000 ships, and 1,000 ships is more than sentiment can pay. 1,000 ships. Dana forwarded it inward, and then sat in the dark, and did the arithmetic she did not want to do. The open hand had brought 2,040 hulls, and had not lost one against 200. But 1,000 Cull warships was not 200, and the Dominion had named the third shelf as its target. The world that was only now beginning to recover, where the doctor named Iris Vance was still on the surface, still working, still kneeling in the dust beside sick children, with the whole sky as her guard. The Dominion meant to take that world apart while the humans watched, and to make answering a cry for help cost so much that no one would ever do it again. Dana expected the human response to be another fleet. She was wrong. The human response, when it came back through the deep relay, was a question, addressed to the people of the third shelf, and copied to Meridian Reach, and Dana read it and did not understand it at first. The question was, do you want us to leave? It was Fleet Captain Marion Okafor's voice, the same tired, kind voice, and she explained the question with a care that Dana would think about for years. We can take the doctor home, the captain said. We can take the open hand home. The Cull Dominion has named your world as its target, only because we answered your call. If we leave, the Dominion has no example to make. They may let you recover. They may not. We cannot promise. But we will not hold you on a battlefield against your will, because the choice belongs to you. It was always your choice. You chose to call for help knowing it might ring the dinner bell. Now you choose again, with better information. Do you want the sky to stay, knowing the Dominion is bringing 1,000 ships? Or do you want us to go, and take our war with us? Dana realized she was leaning toward the screen again, the way she had leaned the first night. She realized the whole edge was leaning with her, because the captain had left the channel open again, on purpose, so that every small world would hear a powerful people ask a weak one for permission. The Cull had never asked permission. The Cull took. And here was the human race, with 2,000 ships and a war coming, asking a dying world whether it would prefer to be defended. The people of the third shelf took a full day to answer. Dana understood why. They were not deciding whether they wanted to be saved. They were deciding whether they had the right to ask others to bleed for them, which was a different question, and a heavier one. And it was exactly the question the Cull had spent generations making sure the small worlds never felt strong enough to ask. To say stay was to ask the human fleet to fight 1,000 ships on their behalf. To say go was to face the Dominion alone. Either way, creatures would die for the third shelf, and the third shelf had to choose whose. When the answer came, it came from a single voice, not the layered chord of the whole people, but one speaker, the eldest of the third shelf, and the translator rendered it slowly, word by careful word. "We have thought about your question," the elder said, "for 1 day and 1 night, which is as long as we dared, because the children cannot wait longer, and we find that we cannot ask you to die for us. We are not worth a war. We have always known we are not worth a war. The hunters taught us that, and we believed them, and we believe them still, in the deep part of us that the sickness did not reach. So our answer should be go. Take your doctor, take your sky, save yourselves the cost of us." Dana's heart sank, and then the elder kept speaking. "But there is a younger voice among us," the elder said, "who has asked to be heard, and we are old enough now to know that the young see some things more clearly than the old. So we will let her tell you our answer, because it is hers more than ours." There was a pause, and then a new voice came across the channel, young in the way the translator could somehow convey, and it said a thing that Dana wrote down and kept, in the place where a soldier keeps the things too true to forget. "The hunters told us we are not worth a war," the young voice said. "You crossed the dust to save 1 child of ours, and you brought 2,000 ships to make certain you could. You have already decided we are worth a war. You decided it before you asked. The only one who still believes we are not worth saving is us, and we learned that from the ones who wanted to eat us. So I will not take their lesson over yours. Stay, please stay, and teach us, while you are here, how a people learns to believe it is worth defending, because we have forgotten, and we would like to remember before the children grow up believing what the hunters taught." The channel was quiet for a moment. Then Fleet Captain Marion Okafor answered, and for the first time her tired, kind voice was not quite even, and Dana realized the captain was moved, and that even a woman who commanded 2,000 warships could be undone by a small world asking, at last, to be taught that it mattered. "We will stay," the captain said, "and we will teach you. Lesson 1 begins now. You said you are not worth a war. You are wrong, and here is how you will know you are wrong. In the next days, 1,000 ships of the Cull Dominion are going to come to your sky to take you apart as an example, and they are going to fail. Not because we are strong, though we are. They are going to fail because you called for help, and we came, and the coming was a promise, and the human race keeps its promises in front of as many witnesses as possible. Watch your sky, people of the third shelf. The Dominion is about to teach the entire edge, the exact opposite of the lesson it intends." While the war gathered overhead, the doctor kept working, and Dana came to understand, from the reports that flowed back through the relay, that the doctor's war and the fleet's war were the same war fought with different weapons. Iris Vance had found the sickness and named it and begun to break it, not in a day, because sicknesses did not break in a day, but steadily, child by child, the way the fleet worked through a battle, one careful action at a time, with no wasted motion. The first child she saved had been the youngest of the elder's line, and the report noted, in a single dry human sentence, that when the child opened her eyes, the whole settlement had gone silent, because the people of the third shelf had not, in living memory, watched a sick child get better. They had only ever watched them get worse. The doctor had given them a thing the hunters had spent generations teaching them not to expect, which was a reason to hope, and hope, Dana was beginning to understand, was the most dangerous thing the human race carried, more dangerous than any beam, because hope could not be unlearned once a people had felt it. Dana listened, on the open channel the captain still left running, to the people of the third shelf change. In the first days they had apologized for everything, for the trouble, for the cost, for taking up the humans' time. By the third day, the young voice who had asked the fleet to stay was speaking differently, asking questions instead of apologizing, asking how the human medicine worked, asking whether her people could learn to make it, asking, once, in a tone the translator rendered as something close to wonder, whether it was true that the human worlds had once been a single dying planet that no one came to save, and had decided, having survived alone, that no one else would ever have to, Dana did not know if that last part was true, but she noticed that no one on the human channels denied it, and she noticed that the young voice of the third shelf had stopped sounding like prey, and she understood that this, more than the routed hunting band, more than the gathering war, was the thing the Cull Dominion truly could not allow, because a people that has stopped sounding like prey is a people that can never be hunted again. Over the next 3 days, the relay filled with the sound of the Dominion gathering, and Dana, who now had standing orders to monitor every channel, listened to a war assemble itself, one ship at a time. The Cull Dominion did not hide its strength. Hiding was for prey. It broadcast its muster openly, counting its hulls aloud across the edge as they arrived. 400, 600, 800, 1,000, the way a creature flexes where its rivals can see, and the counting was meant to break the third shelf's nerve and the human fleet's resolve before a single shot was fired. The Cull had always understood that most battles were won in the fear before them. They did not yet understand that they were facing a people who had decided not to be afraid in front of witnesses, on purpose, as policy. The open hand did not flex back. That was the part that unsettled the Dominion. Dana could hear it on the trade tongue channels, the growing unease as the Cull counted to 1,000, and the human fleet simply held station over the third shelf and said nothing. The humans did not announce reinforcements. They did not threaten. They arranged themselves once more into the patient shape that was neither defensive nor aggressive, the closing hand with the white hospital cruiser safe in its palm, and they waited. And the waiting was louder than any boast, because a fleet that does not boast against 1,000 ships is either a fool or knows something the 1,000 ships do not. It knew something. Dana found out what on the third night, when the deep relay carried a quiet coded burst inward, and then went silent, and an hour later, she watched the edge of the dust lane begin to shimmer. The human worlds had not sent reinforcements to the third shelf, because reinforcements were already coming, had been coming since the day the Dominion made its threat, quietly, without a broadcast, because the human race understood that the most frightening fleet is the one the enemy does not know is there. A second formation crossed the dust behind the Dominion's attention, not to join the open hand, but to take a position the Cull had not thought to watch, and Dana, alone in the dark with 2 channels open, was perhaps the only creature on the entire edge who knew that the 1,000 ships of the Dominion were already, without realizing it, surrounded. She did not forward that part. Holloway told her not to. "Let the Cull count their 1,000, the old commander said, his face grim in the relay light. "Let them feel certain. The certainty is the trap. The human worlds did not come out here to win a battle, Corporal. They came to end a thing. And you do not end a thing by frightening it off. You end it by letting it commit, completely, in front of everyone, and then closing the hand." On the 4th night the Dominion finished its muster and sent its final word to the third shelf, and Dana logged it in full, because Holloway said the Edge would want the record. The voice of the Dominion had changed since its first broadcast. It was still cold, but underneath the cold, Dana could now hear the thing the old hunting band captain had heard in the human formation and failed to make his commander believe. She could hear doubt, 1,000 ships, and the Dominion was speaking the way a creature speaks when it has counted its own strength one too many times, reassuring itself. "You have chosen the sky over survival," the Dominion told the third shelf. "You have let the Edge creatures make you their cause. Then you will share their lesson. We will arrive in your sky at the next turning of your world, 1,000 strong, and we will begin with your settlements, and end with the white ship and the healer, and the Edge creatures will watch, and the entire Edge will watch, and they will learn that the price of answering a cry is to bury the ones who cried. There is no fleet large enough to make this safe. Sentiment cannot buy 1,000 ships. Surrender the healer now, and we will make the example brief." The third shelf did not answer. Dana noticed that, and understood it, and was proud of it in a way she could not have explained. The old third shelf would have answered, would have apologized, would have tried to bargain its own smallness. The new third shelf, 4 days into remembering that it was worth defending, simply did not reply, because it had already given its answer to the only people whose answer it trusted, and it was done speaking to the hunters. The human fleet did not answer either. The open hand held its silence and its patient shape over the recovering world, and behind the Dominion's back the second formation sat unseen in the dark of the dust, and Dana Holt sat in the listening room with every channel open, and her cold coffee long forgotten, and she watched the clock count down toward the turning of a world she had never seen, and she thought about the young voice that had asked to be taught how a people learns to believe it is worth defending. She thought the lesson was about to be delivered in full, written across an entire sky, in a language even the Cull Dominion would finally be unable to misread. And Dana Holt, 19 years old, on a night watch that had stopped being quiet 11 days ago and would never be quiet again, looked out the listening room window toward the dust lane, toward the dying and recovering world, toward the 1,000 ships gathering beyond it, and understood that she was about to watch the human race do the impossible thing twice, and that the second time, the whole galaxy would be watching with her. She did not sleep that night, and she did not want to. Some watches, she had learned, were worth staying awake for, and a recruit who had once been given the night shift because nothing ever happened on it was now the closest set of human ears to the moment an entire edge of the galaxy was about to change its mind about what it was worth. The Cull Dominion came at the turning of the world, 1,000 ships at once, and they came certain, and the certainty lasted exactly as long as it took them to notice that the human fleet was not where it should have been. Dana watched it on the relay, every channel open, and she understood the shape of the trap the moment the Dominion entered the third shelf sky. The open hand was there, 2,040 hulls, holding the closing hand formation over the recovering world, with the white hospital cruiser safe in its palm. But the open hand did not move to meet the Dominion. It held. It held the way a door holds, and the Dominion, seeing a fleet that would not advance, read it as fear, and did what its doctrine demanded. It committed. All 1,000 ships drove forward at once toward the world and the white ship and the healer, certain that the humans were holding back out of weakness, certain that a fleet which would not charge was a fleet that could be overwhelmed. They drove straight into the gap between the open hand in front of them and the second human formation that had been sitting unseen in the dark of the dust behind them for 4 days. The second formation had a name too, Dana learned, because the human worlds named everything they meant to keep. It was called the Closed Door, and it was the companion to the open hand, the way a fist is the companion to a palm, and it numbered 1,500 hulls, and it had been built for exactly one purpose, which was to be the thing the enemy did not know was there. It carried no hospital ship, it offered nothing. It had crossed the dust in absolute silence 4 days before the Dominion arrived, running dark, every engine banked, drifting into position on the far side of the feeding ground, with the patience of a people who had learned, over a long and bloody history, that the most decisive force in any battle is the one the enemy has already counted as absent. The Cull never counted it. That was the whole of the trap. The Dominion had spent 4 days counting the open hand, 2,040 hulls, a number it believed it could overwhelm with 1,000 if it struck fast and committed fully. It had done its arithmetic carefully, the way a predator does, and its arithmetic was correct, and its arithmetic was beside the point, because there was a second number it did not have. 1,500 ships, silent in the dark behind it. The Dominion had committed its full strength against a fleet it outnumbered in its own mind, and it had driven that strength into the exact center of a space with the open hand on one side and the closed door on the other. And the moment it was fully committed, the moment there was no longer any possibility of an orderly withdrawal, both human formations turned inward at once. Dana would describe it, in the decades after, as the moment the galaxy's oldest bullies learned what the human race had always known, which was that the open hand and the closed door are the same people, and that the only thing that decides which one you meet is what you do when a weaker creature cries for help. The hand closed. Dana had seen it close on 40 ships 11 days ago. Now she watched it close on 1,000, and the scale of it was a thing she could not hold in her mind. The relay display blooming with the cold blue light of 2 human formations turning inward at the same instant. The open hand from the world side, and the second fleet from the dust side, and the 1,000 ships of the Cull Dominion caught between them with nowhere to run. Exactly as Holloway had said, committed, completely, in front of everyone. What followed was not a battle in the way the Cull understood battles. The Cull understood battles as a thing that flowed, that surged and broke, and surged again, that could be won by nerve and lost by hesitation. The human race did not fight that kind of battle. Dana watched the 2 formations work through the trapped fleet with the same cold patience she had seen the Steady Words Wedge use on the hunting band, except now there were 2,040 ships on one side and a second fleet on the other, and the counting was vast and methodical, and it did not stop. Every cull ship was a number. The numbers were assigned, and the numbers were worked through, lowest to highest. And as each cull ship was finished, its number went dark, and the Dominion's 1,000 became 900, became 700, became 400, and the Dominion's certainty came apart faster than its fleet. There was a cull Captain Dana came to think of, though she never knew the creature's name, because of one transmission that escaped onto the trade tongue channel in the middle of the closing. It was a young captain, by the sound of it, near the front of the Dominion's charge, and it had been the first to realize that the lane behind the fleet had closed, that the dark the Dominion had driven through was not empty after all. Its transmission was not a battle order, and not a plea. It was a question, broadcast wide in panic, and it was the same question, Dana realized, that the old hunting band captain had asked 11 days before, the question the entire cull people had spent generations refusing to ask. How long, the young captain said, how long were they there, in the dark, waiting? How long have we been the prey and not known it? No one answered the young captain. There was no time to answer it, and no mercy in the answer, which was that the human formation had been waiting 4 days, and that the cull had been the prey not for 4 days, but for as long as they had believed otherwise, because the belief was the trap. The belief had always been the trap. The certainty that the strong announced themselves and the weak cried out had blinded the cull to the one possibility their whole doctrine could not contain, which was a people strong enough to choose to look weak, a people who would hold station and say nothing and let 1,000 ships call them frightened, precisely so that the 1,000 ships would commit. The cull had read silence as fear for so long that they had forgotten silence could be patience, and patience could be a closing door, and a closing door could be the last thing a hunter ever flew into. Dana listened to the young captain's question go unanswered, and she felt something she had not expected to feel for a member of the cull, which was not pity exactly, but recognition. The young captain had asked the right question one breath too late. The whole cull people had, and the human race, with 2 formations and a 4-day silence, and a doctor in a clinic far below, had built an entire battle around the certainty that they would. The voice of the Dominion came back on the trade tongue channel partway through, and it was not cold anymore. It had stopped being able to be cold. It demanded to know what the humans were doing, as though a battle could be a thing that broke the rules, as though there were rules, as though the cull's doctrine had been a law of the galaxy, rather than a habit of bullies that had never once been tested by a people who refused to be afraid. You cannot do this, the Dominion said, and Dana heard the doctrine dying in real time, the way she had heard the hunting band's pride die 11 days before. We are 1,000 ships. Sentiment cannot pay for 1,000 ships. You cannot spend this much to save a world worth nothing. And Fleet Captain Marion Okafor answered, in the tired, kind voice, on the open channel, for the whole edge to hear, and her answer was the thing the entire story had been building toward, the lesson written across a sky. You keep saying the world is worth nothing, the captain said. You have said it so many times that you believe it, and you believed we believed it too, and that was your mistake. The same mistake your hunting band made 11 days ago. The same mistake your whole people have made, for as long as you have been eating the weak. You think value is a thing a world has to prove before it is defended. We do not. We decided this world was worth defending the moment it asked, not because of what it could pay, because it asked. And we are the kind of people who answer, and we have grown very tired of watching the kind of people who do not. You brought 1,000 ships to teach the edge that answering a cry is fatal. Look at your sky, Dominion. Look at what the edge is learning instead. Dana looked at the sky too, through the relay, and she understood what the captain meant. The open channel was filling again, the way it had 11 days ago, but 100 times over now, every small world on the edge listening, every held-back voice, every people the cull had ever taught to swallow its cries. They were watching 1,000 hunters be unmade over a world worth nothing, and they were learning, all at once, in public, that the thing the cull had taught them was a lie. The crying was never the weakness. The crying was a test, and the human race answered it, and answering it was not soft. It was the strongest thing in the sky. The Dominion broke. Not its formation, which was already gone, but its will. The surviving ships, perhaps 200 of the original 1,000, stopped trying to reach the world, and tried only to escape. And Dana waited to see whether the human fleet would chase them down, whether the counting would continue to zero, because the cull had earned it, because a people that had hunted the weak for generations had a debt that would never be fully paid. The human fleet let them go. That was the part Dana least expected and longest remembered. The two human formations opened, deliberately, on the dust side, and left the surviving cull a lane to run, and Fleet Captain Okafor spoke to them one last time as they fled, and her voice was not merciful and was not cruel. It was something harder than both, the voice of a people delivering a sentence. "Go home," the captain said. "Tell the Dominion what you saw. Tell every hunting band, every feeding ground, every dark place where the cull wait for the weak to cry out. The crying is answered now. The edge is not a feeding ground anymore. You will find new work, the way one of your own captains told you to 11 days ago, because the next time we will not leave a lane open, and there will not be a next time, because you are going to carry this lesson to every corner of cull space yourselves, and you are going to make certain it is believed, because you have seen what disbelieving it costs." The 200 ran. Dana tracked them on the relay until they crossed the far edge of the dust and were gone, carrying the lesson home, and the sky over the third shelf was clear, and the open hand had not lost a ship, and the second formation had not lost a ship, and the white hull of the lamp of Antares sat untouched at the center of the closed hand, and far below, on the surface, the doctor named Iris Vance had not even known the battle was happening, because she had been in a settlement clinic the whole time, saving the Elder's youngest, who would live now, who would grow up on a world that had finally learned what it was worth. The people of the third shelf came onto the open channel then, all of them at once, the layered cord, and the translator could not flatten what was in it, and did not try. It was not an apology. That was how Dana knew everything had changed. In 11 days, the people of the third shelf had sent 100 apologies across the dust, for the trouble, for the cost, for the asking. Now, with 1,000 hunters unmade over their heads, and their children getting well below, they did not apologize. The young voice spoke for all of them, and she said only 6 words, and they were the 6 words that the cull had spent generations making certain no small world on the edge would ever dare to say. "We are worth a war," she said. Dana found out, much later, exactly what the doctor had been doing in the minutes the sky was being decided. Iris Vance had been in the settlement clinic with the Elder's youngest, the child she had pulled back from the sickness 11 days before, who had relapsed in the night, the way the sickness sometimes made them relapse, cruelly, just when hope had taken root. The doctor had not known 1,000 ships were overhead. She had not asked. She had a child to keep breathing, and that was the only battle in front of her, and she fought it the way the fleet fought its own, with no wasted motion and no thought of stopping, and at the exact moment, by the timestamps Dana checked years afterward, that the open hand and the closed door turned inward on the Dominion, the doctor got the child breathing again. 2 victories, the same minute, one in the sky and one in the dust, and the doctor never knew how perfectly they had lined up, because she had been too busy with the only work that had ever mattered to her, which was keeping one small life from going out. That, Dana came to think, was the whole secret of the human race, the thing the cull had never been able to understand, and never would. The fleet and the doctor were not 2 different things. They were one thing. A people that would cross the dust to save a single child was the same people that would close a door on 1,000 hunters to make certain the saving stuck, and there was no contradiction in it, because the war and the mercy had always come from the same place. The simple, stubborn refusal to let a thing that asked for help go unanswered. On the open channel, the asking had become a flood, where 11 days ago a single grain world and a single mining station and a single drifting convoy had dared to break the cull's silence. Now there were hundreds, then thousands, small voices from across the whole edge, no longer apologizing, no longer afraid, asking plainly for the things they needed, because they had watched 1,000 hunters die over a world worth nothing, and they had finally believed. Dana forwarded all of them inward, every one, all night, until her hands ached, and she understood that the human worlds were going to be very busy for a very long time, and that they would not complain about it once, because being asked was the thing they had crossed the dust hoping to be. And Dana Holt, 19 years old, alone in a listening room, 11 light hours away, put her face in her hands, not because she was sad, but because she had spent 4 months being told that the night watch was where nothing happened, and she had been the one to ring the bell, and the bell had been heard all the way back to the human worlds. And the human worlds had answered, and a whole edge of the galaxy was going to fall asleep that night for the first time in generations, without being afraid to call for help. Behind her, the door of the listening room opened, and Holloway came in, the old commander who had taught her how to read a thing she did not want to understand. He did not say anything for a while. He just stood beside her recruit's chair and watched the relay scroll its flood of unafraid voices, and at last he put one hand on her shoulder, briefly, the way the service almost never allowed, and he said the only thing worth saying. "You rang the bell, Corporal. Whatever else you do in this service, you rang the bell once, and a whole edge heard it. Most of us never get one night like this." Then he took his hand away and went to make fresh coffee, because the asking was still coming, and someone had to be awake to forward it on. The doctor stayed on the third shelf for 2 years, and by the time she left, the sickness was gone, and the world had a name on the human charts, and the name was the one the people of the third shelf chose for themselves, which translated, the records noted, as the place where they finally came. Dana Holt did not see any of it firsthand. She heard it all through the relay, because she stayed at Meridian Reach, because the relay had become the busiest listening post on the entire edge, and the service was not about to move the recruit who had rung the bell. She was not a recruit for long. The night the Dominion broke, she had been a corporal 4 months out of training. Within a year, she was running the listening room she had once cleaned, and within 5, she had a post of her own, and through all of it, she did the same work she had done on that first quiet night, which was to listen for the small voices and make certain they were heard. The edge changed around her, slowly and then all at once, the way the sickness had changed and the way everything important seemed to change. In the first months after the Dominion broke, the asking came as a flood, every held-back voice spilling out at once. But the flood settled, over the years, into something steadier and stranger and far better. The small worlds of the edge stopped only asking. They started answering. A grain world that the human race had helped through a blight sent its own ships, 2 years later, to a mining station whose air was failing, and the records at Meridian Reach noted it as the first time in the history of the edge that one small world had crossed dark space to save another, without being asked twice, without apologizing, without waiting to see whether it was worth the cost. The people of the third shelf, who had learned the lesson first, became its loudest teachers. The young voice who had asked the fleet to stay grew into something the translator eventually rendered as a kind of envoy, and she spent her life carrying the lesson from world to world, the lesson the human race had written across her sky, which was that the crying is never the weakness, and a people that answers it is the strongest thing in the dark. The Cull were not destroyed. Dana thought about that. In the long years, more than she thought about the battles, the human race had let 200 Dominion ships run, on purpose, to carry the lesson home, and the lesson had done what no fleet could have done. The Cull did not vanish. They changed. It took a generation, and it was not clean, and there were hunting bands that did not believe, and had to learn again the hard way, but the edge was no longer a feeding ground, and a people whose entire identity had rested on the certainty that the weak were prey found, slowly, that the certainty would not hold, because every small world they approached now knew the truth, and a people cannot hunt prey that has stopped being afraid. Some of the Cull found new work, the way the old hunting band captain had told them to. Some of them, the record suggested, eventually started answering cries themselves, which Dana found the most remarkable thing of all, that the human lesson had been strong enough to turn even the hunters, given time, given witnesses, given a single afternoon in which the whole edge watched the doctrine die. The day the doctor left the third shelf, the whole world watched, and Dana watched the world watching, through the relay, because the people of the third shelf put the moment on every channel they had, no longer afraid of who might hear. They had built something in the 2 years, a thing the translator struggled with, a word that meant both a school and a promise at once, a place where their own healers would learn what the human doctor had taught, so that the next time a sickness came, they would not have to cry across the dust for a stranger. That was the doctor's true gift, Dana understood, watching it. Iris Vance had not only saved the children, she had made certain the third shelf would never again be helpless, never again be reduced to apologizing for the trouble of dying, because she had given them not just a cure, but the knowledge to make their own. And knowledge, once given, could not be taken back by any hunter. The elder of the third shelf, the one who had said his people were not worth a war, spoke at the doctor's leaving, and he was very old now, and the translator rendered his words slowly, with care. "We asked you for one healer," the elder said, "because we believed one healer was the most a world like ours could deserve. You gave us a healer, and a sky, and a school, and a name on your charts, and something we did not know to ask for, and did not know we had lost. You gave us back the belief that we are worth saving. The hunters spent 100 generations teaching us we were not. You spent 2 years teaching us we were, and you won, because the truth is patient, and because you were more patient than the hunters, and because you kept your promise where everyone could see. We will not forget. We have made certain our children cannot forget. They will grow up knowing that when the third shelf cried out, the sky answered, and that the answering was not a debt we owe, but a thing we now pass on." And then the elder did a thing that Dana had never seen a creature of the edge do. In all her years of listening, he did not thank the human race. He had thanked them 100 times in the first days, in the language of the prey, the endless apologetic gratitude of a people who believed they had taken something they could not repay. He did not do that now. Instead, he made a promise, in the language of equals, and the promise was that the third shelf would answer the next cry it heard, whoever it came from, however far across the dust, because it had learned how, and because a gift like the one it had been given was only truly received when it was passed on. Dana logged the promise, and she watched the edge log it too, in world after world, and she understood that the human race had not created a dependent out here. It had created an inheritor. Iris Vance, the doctor, became a name the edge sang, the way it sang the names of the ships. There were children across a dozen worlds, in the years after, who had been named for her, small alien lives carrying a human name, because a human had crossed the dust to keep them breathing. Dana met the doctor only once, years later, when the lamp of Antares passed through Meridian Reach, on its way to another world that had finally dared to call. The doctor was older than Dana expected, and quieter than Dana expected, and when Dana told her, nervously, that she had been the one on the night watch who first heard the signal and woke the commander, the doctor took her hand and held it for a moment, and said a thing Dana kept for the rest of her life. "Someone always has to be the one who hears it," the doctor said. "The fleet gets the songs, but the songs only happen because someone was awake, and listening, and refused to decide it was nothing. You did the most important part. You believed a small voice the first time." Fleet Captain Marion Okafor, Dana never met, and never needed to, because she had heard her in the only way that mattered. On the open channels the captain always left running on purpose, the tired, kind voice explaining to bullies and to dying worlds alike that value was not a thing you had to prove before you were defended. Dana came to understand, over the years, that the open channel had been the captain's real weapon, more than the 2,000 ships, more than the closed door. The human race had not just won the battles. It had made certain the whole edge watched it win them, and watched why. Because a lesson taught in secret teaches no one, and a people that wants to change the galaxy has to be willing to be seen doing it. The captain had spent her career being seen. It was, Dana thought, the bravest thing of all. Braver than the fighting, to fight your battles with the doors open, so that everyone could learn from them. There was one signal Dana kept, out of all the thousands she handled across her long career, the one she played sometimes on quiet nights when the relay was slow, which it almost never was anymore. It was not the first distress call, the 9 days of apology. It was a signal that came 4 years after the Dominion broke, from a world Dana had never heard of, far out past the third shelf, a small world with a small voice, and it was a distress call, and the sickness in it was a different sickness, and the danger in it was a different danger, but the shape of it was the same small people facing the same large dark. Except this signal did not apologize. That was why Dana kept it. The small world did not say it was sorry for the trouble. It did not say it was not worth an army. It did not undersell itself by a single word. It simply stated, plainly, what was wrong, and what it needed, and where it was. And then it said the thing that told Dana the lesson had spread further than even she had dared to hope. "We have heard," the small world said, "that there is a people who answer. We are calling because we believe it is true. Please come. We will be waiting, and we are not afraid. We are not afraid." Dana read that line off the screen, 4 years after a night watch she had been given because nothing ever happened on it, and she forwarded the signal inward to the human worlds, and she knew, before the answer came, what the answer would be, because she had heard it answered 100 times now and it never changed. A fleet would form, a doctor, or an engineer, or whatever the small world needed, would volunteer to cross the dark. And behind that one would come everything that kept the one alive, not because the human race was soft, but because it was not. Because a strong people defends the asking, and only a frightened people preys on it. And the human race had decided, a long time ago, on a dying world of its own, that no one came to save, what kind of people it was going to be. Dana Holt served 40 years on the edge, and she walked away from the service at the end of it on her own 2 feet. An old woman who had started as a recruit on a night watch and ended as the most trusted set of ears in 100 light years. And when the young officers asked her, as they always did, what the most important night of her career had been, she did not tell them about the Dominion, or the 1,000 ships, or the closed door. She told them about the 9-day signal, and the apology, and the moment she decided to walk down 3 flights of cold metal stairs and wake an old commander to tell him a world was dying, and had asked, with terrible politeness, for a single doctor. "The most important thing I ever did," she told them, "I did before any ship fired a shot. I heard a small voice ask for too little, and I decided it was worth waking someone for. That is the whole of it. That is the whole of everything the human race is, out here at the edge. We are the people who hear the small voices, and decide they are worth waking up for, and then we send the sky." And then she would tell them the part she loved best, the part that had taken 40 years to come true. She would tell them that out on the edge of the dust, where the hunters had once ruled and the small worlds had once swallowed their cries, there were children now who had grown up never knowing that asking for help had ever been dangerous, who called out freely whenever they were in need, the way a child calls for a parent in the dark, certain of being heard. The Cull had spent generations teaching the edge to be silent. The human race had spent 40 years teaching it to call, and the calling had won, the way it always won when someone was finally willing to answer it, and the edge of the galaxy was loud now, and unafraid, and full of small voices that had learned, at last, that they were worth a war, and worth a doctor, and worth the trouble, and worth coming for. There came a night, many years on, when Dana was the old one, when she gave a recruit the night watch because nothing ever happened on it, and she heard herself say the words and stopped, halfway through, and laughed, because she remembered being told the same thing, and she remembered how wrong it had turned out to be. So she changed what she said. She told the recruit, a nervous young thing 4 months out of training, that the night watch was the most important post on the station, and the recruit did not believe her, the way Dana had not believed it once, and Dana let it go, because some things could only be learned by living them. But she told the recruit one thing more, before she left her to the dark and the quiet and the dead consoles. She told her that somewhere out there, on some small world she had never heard of, a voice might call in the night, asking for too little, apologizing for the trouble, certain it was not worth answering, and that when it came, the recruit would have a choice, the same choice Dana had once had, the same choice the whole human race made over and over again across the dark. She could decide the small voice was nothing, and go back to her cold coffee, and let the quiet hold. Or she could get up, and walk down the cold metal stairs, and wake someone, and ring the bell. "Ring the bell," Dana told her. "Whatever else you do out here, if you hear a small voice in the dark, believe it the first time, and ring the bell. The fleet will do the rest. The fleet always does the rest. But the fleet cannot answer a cry that no one was awake to hear. And so the most important thing the human race has, out here at the edge of everything, is not the ships. It is the ones who are listening. Be one of the ones who is listening." And then she went to bed, and left the listening to the young, the way it had once been left to her, and the relay hummed in the dark, full of unafraid voices, waiting for the next small world brave enough to believe that someone would come. In her later years, Dana made a study, quietly, of her own, of the names. She had spent a lifetime hearing the human warships named over the relay, and she had come to understand that the names were not decoration, they were a doctrine written in 2 or 3 words apiece. The steady word. The long memory, the we came back, the ode, the quiet promise, the patience. She had thought the first night that a people who valued the weak must be soft, and she had learned across 40 years that she had it exactly backward, the way the Cull had it backward, the way most of the galaxy had it backward. The human race did not name its warships for glory or for fear. It named them for the things it meant to keep, and then it kept them, in front of as many witnesses as it could gather, until the keeping became a fact the whole edge could build on. A people that names a battlecruiser the We Came Back is a people that has decided, in advance, in public, what it will do, and Dana came to believe that this was the true weapon, more than the beams, more than the closing hand. The human race had simply decided who it was going to be, and then had refused, across centuries and light years and 1,000 chances to do the easier thing, to be anyone else. She thought, too, about the word the third shelf had chosen for itself when it took its place on the human charts. The place where they finally came. The people of the third shelf had named their whole world after the moment of being answered, the way the humans named their ships after the things they meant to keep. And Dana found a great rightness in that. A small alien people learning the human habit of writing your truest hope into your name so that you could never quite forget it. The edge was full of such names now. There were worlds named for the day the sky answered, and worlds named for the doctor, and one small station, far out past the dust, that the record said had named its single relay tower after a human corporal who had heard a signal in the night and rung a bell, though Dana never confirmed that one, and never tried to, because some gifts are better left as rumors a person can choose to believe on the quiet nights. What she knew for certain was this. The edge that had once been a feeding ground was now a web of small voices, each one willing to call, and each one willing to answer, and the web had been spun, strand by strand, out of a single decision made a long way away, on a dying world that no one came to save. The decision that the human race would be the kind of people who hear the small voices and decide they are worth waking up for. Everything else, every fleet and every doctor and every closing door, had only ever been that one decision, kept. Dana Holt lived a long time, and she died old and quiet on the world where she had once stood the night watch, and the relay she had tended carried the news of it out across the edge, and the small worlds answered, the way she had taught them to, with their voices unafraid. They did not apologize for their grief. They simply said her name, the woman who had heard them first, and they said it across 100 worlds, into the open air, certain of being heard, and somewhere out past the dust, a fleet that kept its promises in front of as many witnesses as possible, was already turning toward the next small voice that needed it, because the work was never finished, and the human race had never once wanted it to be.